And welcome. You're right on time once again. Now, the safety of journalists is critical for the democracy and development of any country, but sadly it's often not treated with the utmost importance it deserves. Journalists in Uganda face the same challenges that other journalists experience globally, and this prompted the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization to roll out a national coordination mechanism for safety of journalists that seeks to protect and prevent crimes against journalists in Uganda.
But looking back at the recent events that have seen journalists beaten while in line of duty, some of the cases bordering to torture, plus the threats by the regulator on independence of journalism, leaves one wondering how safe it is for journalists to practice in Uganda today. And this morning we are joined by Mr. Robert Sempala, who happens to be the Executive Director, Human Rights Network for Journalists. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. You are the person that fights for our rights. And I know in this space that we are in today, it has been very clear, even with all the research that has been done, that has been released, journalism in this country is not as easy as it used to be. Why hasn't it gotten to where it is today?
Thank you very much. But in 1993, with the liberalization of the media, everybody had lots of hopes that since the environment has been opened up, there are so many actors, freedom of expression was going to flourish. And did it flourish up to some point? I think when we descended into multi-party political dispensation. Since that time, there has really been a struggle to utilize the media by the politicians. You know, the media plays a very central role in everything, including development, mobilization, education, entertainment, name it. So it is something that everyone wants to get a piece of. But in some democracies that, especially in their infancies, the media is looked at as an enemy. And some people have called them the unwanted witnesses. You know, you have to witness, but people do not want you to do that role. And that's where the Ugandan media is at right now. We've seen so many journalists being attacked, not because they're doing a lot of education, a lot of entertainment news, but those that are really engaged into democracy, accountability, transparency, and pushing for good rule. Those are the journalists that have really suffered a lot. When you look at our very context here, analyzing the different reports that Human Rights Network for Journalists Uganda, where I come from, has released, all of them point to a bit of political intolerance, and that really is the biggest problem that journalists face that go to the field. And we really have had lots of discussions around this subject. We do not know how much more we must do, but you continuously see journalists being battered on the streets and their line of duty. But the most interesting thing now is that whenever journalists are beaten, there's some kind of cosmetic response from the powers that be. Immediately after, they really think the journalists must be beaten.
When you talk about the cosmetic covering up of the few things when it comes to when the state authorities decide as the enemy, we're no longer being called the media this morning. We look at it as the enemy. We had the government spokesperson this year after the release of the Global Press Freedom Index, yes, when we saw that our ranking had dropped from 117th to 125th, quite a big drop. Yes. And he came out to say we're not telling the police to we're not training them to beat the media. So if they're saying they're not doing this, let's tap into the mindset of these state authority actors, from the police and a number of these. Why do they seem to look at us as the enemy?
I think somebody intimated me at some point that during their training, they're told that every time you see a person with a camera or recording or taking your photographs, you are faced with an enemy. So they have that in as their mindset, that an enemy is facing you. They know at any one moment they're going to conduct themselves in an unprofessional manner, and they do not want that to be trickled down to the wider public. But I know for a fact that most of the police officers that have been seen beating journalists are extremely partisan. When they see journalists, they really want to associate them with the activities that they're coming to cover. And that is a very wrong mentality for any security officer, to really think that journalists are not doing their work. In a democracy that is flourishing very well, you'll see the journalists being protected to do their work, even when they do not toe your line. You have to create space for them to operate and use the very media. If you think they are telling lies, if you think they are biased, you use the very media to counter what is happening, as opposed to beating everyone you see covering news. And you think what I've heard here now is that most politicians tend to believe that the journalists covering the opposition are equal in the opposition. At some point, the police chief even used to say they sleep in the opposition chief's home, and he was wondering how they could get into contact with the information before the police or security. And they always thought that the journalists or media should report to them that so and so is planning a
before
war,
we go ahead and cover it.
And that is not how the media works. So failure to share information with the security now has put us in a very big predicament, for them to think that you're now a part and parcel of the opposition. And that is a gross failure to appreciate the role and workings of the media.
So how do we change that? How do we change this thought that they have? Because we are the watchdog. We are the ones that set the agenda as the media. So how do we continue to do that, but work with the security organs and also let them do our job? Do we not at one point start to conflict?
Yeah, we many times have conflicted. Because recently we had a meeting in Kasese with the security chiefs just last week. And all they were calling for from us was to share information. And I was telling them, we share information through our media houses, not giving it to you as security. Two, that we must embed with them on their side, not being neutral, independent when we go to cover, especially these chaotic areas. They sound a bit illogical, but they should also leave the journalists to choose where to be, so that a journalist who has chosen not to be on your side is not an enemy in that regard. And how we are changing their mindsets is one, by going for the wrong guys in the police, the errant officers, going for them individually. Two, to sensitize them continuously. There is a very big gap between the guys manning the operations and those in the boardrooms, those who give leadership to the police. We have several talks to those that give leadership, but now we want to descend down to the guys who man the operations. And at that point, we think we can tap into that opportunity at the training institutions for the police, to talk to them, for them to appreciate the role that is played by the media, and to know how the media works. The media does not work like security operatives, because it is extremely counterproductive for journalists to share information with security. That is betrayal of your profession, but also it kind of sets you against your colleagues. If they ever knew that Robert Sempala, whenever we invite him, he first calls the police to say, I'm going to DPFDC or People Power, there's such an activity, please be informed. That is extremely not our work, but the security wants us to do that work. So we continuously must dialogue. Interestingly, they have accepted to talk to us of late. Tomorrow, actually, we'll be at the police headquarters to meet the police leadership over these issues. The Army has equally accepted to talk to us on Thursday. We'll be at the Army headquarters to talk to them about these new developments of attacks against journalists, and more critically, that we're descending into a very politically sensitive period, where we hope to see everybody vying for a microphone in order to communicate, in order to hold people to their side.
This is not the first time that you're meeting. This is not the first time that you're talking to these people. So when every single time there's physical attacks on a person from one side to another, in marriages, in relationships, they will always tell you there's a lack of respect, there is a lack of understanding from both sides. In this case, would you say there's a lack of professionalism from both sides? Would you say there's a lack of respect from maybe the journalists to the police, or the police to the journalists? Because with some of the images that we have been sharing here, when you see a police officer that has been trained not for just 2 weeks, but has been trained, that has what they would call chepes. Pips. Not just one, but even 3.
Yes.
Flogging a journalist. There is a problem. There's a problem in there. Is it unprofessionalism? Is it not having respect for each other?
There is a fundamental problem, but I think sometimes it's overzealousness on the part of the security operatives. Because if I'm in the wrong, the law presupposes that I'm innocent until proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction. And as such, you're supposed to treat me as a suspect, not as a convict. What is done instead now is descending on you and flogging you, beating you up, confiscating your gadgets, distracting you from reaching news scenes.
So does that mean that now the police don't, because there's 2 sides to the story.
Yeah.
Is it that the journalists push too much, that they don't know their limit? Because when you say that if by any chance if I am in the wrong, which means that there is a problem on your side as well as journalists, that you have pushed the limit to going into the wrong. One. And then there is that side of the police, that do they understand how to deal with someone who is in the wrong? Because you see now that's
extremely very, very tricky, because as professionals, the security officers, whether the army or the police, are supposed to know how to deal with the public, especially the ordinary citizens, and disregard they're dealing with journalists who they certainly know will come to cover events. So they must be fine-tuned in their minds to know that you're dealing in an environment that is littered with journalists. 2, we agree there is a problem of unprofessionalism, and that is both sides.
Okay.
Both in the police, though the police one, the security forces one, is more pronounced, because their effects are so dire to the lives of the individual journalists. Because
the reason why I'm pushing you towards the journalist side is because I don't want us to have this debate where we're always blaming one person. Yes? You as the ED of human rights, are you taking some time off to make sure that the journalists, as they go ahead to do what they are meant to do, understand their limit and know? Because when you don't understand your limit, then you're pushing the other person to do what is not right, but neither are you right.
I hear you very well on that, and it is for that ground that we have combed almost the wider part of the country, trying to build capacities of journalists, training them in ethics and professionalism, training them on safety and security issues, training them on the prevailing, obtaining media legislative frameworks, so that they are in the know of the environment within which they are operating. But that notwithstanding, a person who conducts themselves unprofessionally must never be battered the way it is happening now.
Yes, true.
And we have seen even many times journalists who are innocently doing their work, who have kept within the limits of the law, who have kept their distances, being chased after and beaten. They're trying to run away for their lives, and they're chased after and beaten, and their own crime is being present at the scene.
So for cases like that, have you been able to make some headway? Because you see, when every single time a journalist has been beaten, we have seen it somewhere in the papers. Because we are journalists, we fight for each other, and we'll definitely have it in the paper. You'll hear it on the radio. We'll talk about it here, but. Apart from, I've had some have gotten some compensation, but what else has been done in between?
The ultimate one for us is seeking for justice, and justice manifests in different ways. We really want to do it judicially, to go to court and have convictions, and the convicts sentenced to deterrent sentences. And that has happened. We've had cases, Ranga, Shamim Jingo Nakaoya, we've had Rebecca Nakame of the Vision Group, we've had a number, and some are still in court. We've had some acquittals like Timothy Kaliejira, who was charged with treason. We had Augustine Okello-Nrira. All those were acquittals. But now there's this predicament of the perpetrators still talking their victims into negotiations, amicable settlements, and those are most rampant. We've at least pushed, and cases have graduated to court, but they never fall to the logical conclusions because they successfully manage to induce the victims into settling for some compensations. And at this point, it's two-way. Sometimes the perpetrators do that role. The other times, the employers themselves prevail over their staff, their journalists, to say, I don't want you anywhere in court. Let this matter end. Let him give you whatever he has. And even in one of the sessions, a media manager received fund on behalf of the journalist, and the journalist was like, no, you'd rather sack me, but I want to be in court over this matter. Yeah, and that shows you how hard it is to push for justice. But I must say, the journalists are increasingly getting more assertive. They report cases to the police, they push up to court, and they have always been around to, adduce all the necessary evidence in order to get justice. And that gives us a lot of hope in caging these errant officers. But these attacks don't only come from security officers, by the way. They come from the communities within which we operate. We've seen journalists being mobbed up by ordinary community members. We've seen journalists being psychologically tortured, physically tortured, and threatened even by their bosses in the media houses. We also have to do house cleaning as media houses, because we see journalists that are never paid, and their only survival is out in the field. We were in Imbarara recently, and one of the media proprietor came and said, I run 2 papers, I don't pay my staff, but they have stayed, nobody leaves. I tell them that I create space for you to know how to survive. So when you bring in stories, I give you a commission. If you don't bring story, you can be my employee for 1 year, and I'm not paying you, but it is okay with me. So the levels of being compromised are extremely high. But to wind up on your point, I must say that a lot must still be done, because we've been failed by these unending investigations in 2 cases. A journalist goes to court today, the other day, their matter is not logically investigated. They're frustrated. So they are really frustrated. And at some point, you really see that these officers are being compromised by the perpetrators, not to investigate logically the issues before them. And at some point, we've run to the Professional Standards Unit of Police, PSU, because that's where we always are referred. But when you get in there, we have over 10 cases which files are gathering a lot of dust. And I know that many Ugandans are really complaining about this very facility of the PSU police. And it's one of the key issues that we want to discuss with the police leadership, to really make it function and let its work be felt by Ugandans craving for justice at the hands of Iran police officers.
Now, you mentioned one thing, that we're moving into a time where we're going to have to cover a number of things, more and more and more as we get closer to 2021. But we have mentioned the communities, we have mentioned the army, we have mentioned the police. Where do we mention the regulator? The Uganda Communications Commission earlier this year, just the suspension because of live broadcasts, because they are the media rights. We need to inform the people of what is happening, but we're inciting violence, they say. Those two, the regulator versus the one who has to actually go out and give the information. Yeah.
So at this point where we are at is it regulation or is it control? What we are seeing now is control. The regulator, UCC, is trying to submerge the media to make it dance to their tunes. And everything that is being done today is done in the wrong way. The UCC Act of 2013, as amended, is extremely clear on the functions of UCC and as far as the media regulation is concerned. They have since usurped the powers of Media Council. They have taken advantage of the Media Council not being duly constituted, because instead of having 12 people, it has only 6. And of the 6, 2 represent NIJU. I think we all know that NIJU is non-existent, and you even wonder how they ended up on that council board. So you literally have 4 that are legitimate representatives on the council, which is far below the quorum. And as such, UCC has utilized that space to dominate regulation of the media. But UCC is also falling short of not having a tribunal in place, which must be headed by a person who has the status of a justice of the High Court. And that person is presumed to have a thorough appreciation of a conducive environment for media to flourish, so that would inform their decisions. As it is now, there is no expert, according to my own knowledge, within UCC that will inform these guys that this is how the media must work, this is within our frameworks, this is outstepping our mandate. We recently had World Press Freedom Day, and we had robust discussions around UCC and clawback effect on the media. And the spokesperson came out and said, we are moving against the media because they do not know how long the stories should be. Instead of giving Bobby Wine, he mentioned Bobby Wine. Instead of giving Bobby Wine 5 minutes, they'll give 45 minutes to a story of Bobby Wine. And I was wondering where it was coming from. Because the story can even be 2 hours, can run every hour, can run for 2 weeks, can run, as long as it's trained.
But media, we are in public interest. That is where we that is where we flourish. That is where we make our money.
And that is not even the work of UCC. So what we should do today is to cage UCC as a whole. We have since joined forces in court now. The Center for Constitutional Governance, Madam Sarah Birete, ourselves, Wuja, and many actors have since come up to say this animal called UCC must be brought to order. And as such, because they will never listen to anything until we drag them to court. And we think we have a very good case, and we know that we will win at the end of the day.
You see, we're getting into that political space of 2021, where we are very sure things are going to get even more tight. We are already in there. And let us be honest, we can have these conversations for as long as we want to. But do we have willing parties? Do we have willing parties here? Because you can have this child, a very stubborn child, you can talk to them for 10 years. If they are not willing to change, if they are not willing to respect you, if they're not willing to treat you the way you should be treated, you can have dialogue for as long as you want to. You'll meet police, you'll meet the army, you'll meet government, you'll meet every single person that UCC, you can go meet whoever you want. Yes. But as you see, because you are part of all these meetings, do you see
rays of hope?
Do you see any hope there that things are going to be different for the journalists?
Yes, I believe in dialogue. I believe in fruitful exchange of ideas. I believe in talking over and about the problems that we're faced with. And we have our partner called the Democratic Governance Facility, DGF. He's talking to government, he's financing government, financing the judiciary, financing many actors that are really working on champion the cause for democracy and democratize as a country. And as such, I know that there are many willing voices to listen. We used to talk a lot to the police under the old leadership. We've not had opportunity to do so under this current leadership. And we think that it's only timely that we give them a fair hearing. And they also, we hope they will give us equally a fair hearing to understand where we're coming from and to even know what worked and what didn't work with the previous leadership. The army, you certainly find very good guys in the army willing to talk to you. And for them, their orders really must be followed to the dot. And that's why we think that we must talk to their bosses and know that the orders will trickle down to these officers manning operations. So I don't want to sound like I have lost hope, because there are still voices that have not been heard, and we must hear them on this. When the new IGP came into office, it was very categorically clear that you beat a journalist, will come for you. So we want to hold him to his word when we face him and say, what happened? Journalists have been beaten. How many are facing the police council? How many are you trying? What have you done about this? And maybe he's done something, and that will be an opportunity for him to share with us. Okay. So I invite every Ugandan to support processes of, building confidence in dialogues wherever they are happening. And two people should really be transparent and true to their words. That way, we will have a peaceful coexistence. But also I want to appeal to the politicians to really practice tolerance, because without political tolerance, in whatever we are doing, one will want to speak to NTV and will not let another person come to speak here. They will come to the studios but drag them out, even smash windows and everything in the name of saying they are going to incite violence. And how do you read the mind of a person to say so and so her, the way he looks now is about to incite violence, the way he's walking,
it's
he's
written
about
all over your face.
So that is really being too suspicious of your people. Certainly means there is a problem somewhere that must be talked about. And where talks fail, many people say they resort to violence.
Okay.
Are we going for violence? No, we still have to give an opportunity to dialogue and peace talks.
Okay. That's interesting. But as, of course, we wrap this up. Thank you very much, Robert, for coming this morning to share that with us. My only point here that I'd really love to leave with you so that you can go think about it is
Please.
It's not that I'm reporting my fellow people, but many times I've had journalists that now they have gotten to that field that, like you said earlier on, being the fact that some media houses are not paying them well, some media houses are not facilitating them well. Now they have gotten the mindset of, let me get myself into trouble, get some compensation, and that is my way of getting to the next level. Or even there is the fact that the people that we have gotten into these problems have ended up now becoming high profile journalists, so just because of incidents like that. And people feel, some of us feel that is the only way to getting to the next step in our profession. So that I'll just leave with you, and you can, as you go through those classes, you can talk to my fellow journalists.
But there have also been innocent victims.
Yeah, true. I'm not saying yes.
Who do not want even compensation, especially those that really want to go to court.
Yes.
And they're not even seeking for prominence because they're not standing as politicians.
Yeah.
So theirs have been falling victims because of their work, innocent victims.
Yeah.
But there are also those that will really provoke, and we've talked to such individuals within the media. Why do you provoke a police officer? Why do you take a shot in his face?
Yeah.
This guy has been under scorching sun for the whole day, hauling tear gas, which is also inhaling, and then you hear his face crying. What is it that you want? Cameras can zoom.
Yes.
You
Yes.
zoom and keep in a safe distance. These are part of the professionalism that we really want to.
The good thing is that you are aware that it is happening, so which is good. Thank you very much, Mr. Sempala Robert, the ED Human Rights Network for Journalists. And on our Kickstarter conversation today, we have been looking at the state of journalists' rights in Uganda. And of course, hopefully the journalists out there, hopefully the lawmakers, police, UCC, you have
Somebody's scared of mentioning UCC.
and those are our bosses. You don't just point fingers in your mother or father.
Our servants.
We don't know. We are yet to find out. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's a pleasure having you, and thank you for fighting for our rights.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
That's it for our Kickstarter conversation. We'll be back in a few minutes as we get into our Tech Note conversation. Good morning.
Shape, height, weight, color. These are the things the fashion industry measures to find the perfect model. But most aspiring models don't have the required measurements. They're